I watched her BMW disappear into the ground like it was swallowed by the earth itself. The dust was still settling when I realized sometimes karma doesn't need a courtroom, it just needs good engineering. But let me back up 6 hours before the pit, before the cops, before the most entitled woman in Texas learned what happens when you keep crossing a man's line. My name's Jake Riverside. I'm an industrial electrician by trade, rancher by blood, and a widower trying to hold together 40 acres of stubborn Texas dirt just outside Austin. The place has been in my family since Eisenhower was president. Grandpa built the first gate, my dad replaced it in the 70s, and now it's mine to protect. That old wooden gate isn't fancy, just weathered boards and steel hinges, but it's the border between what's mine and what's not. And in this part of Texas, that still means something. Thing is, the world around me changed faster than I could keep up. They turned every field nearby into a neighborhood called Willowbrook Estates, all marble driveways and manicured lawns ruled by the self-appointed gods of suburbia, the HOA. Houses start at $800,000, and you can't even hang Christmas lights without a permit. Their monthly fees cost more than my truck. And then there's her, Delilah Thornwick, 48 blonde, power-suited queen of the HOA board. Drives a BMW X7 that costs more than I make in 2 years, talks to waitresses like they're appliances, and thinks owning the biggest house in the subdivision means she owns the whole county. The first time I caught her trespassing was a scorcher of a day, 104 degrees dust, thick as flour, my boots heavy with mud. I came home from a 14-hour shift rewiring a warehouse and found my ranch gate hanging open, chains snapped clean through with bolt cutters. Fresh tire tracks carved right across my pasture. And there she was the next morning standing at her mailbox like she was posing for a magazine cover. I told her politely, "Ma'am, that gate's private property. You can't just drive through my land whenever you want." She looked up from her stack of mail, gave me that frozen country club smile and said, "Well, maybe if you maintained that eyesore of a gate properly, people wouldn't need to worry about it breaking." Then she climbed into her BMW and drove off, spraying gravel across my boots like punctuation. That was the first spark. The next day I installed a heavy-duty chain and a padlock tough enough to stop a bull. $43 from the hardware store. Felt good, like I'd finally drawn the line. By the next evening that chain was in pieces, padlock tossed into my cattle pond like a joke. And when I checked the footage from my cameras, because yes, I wire security systems for a living, there she was. 6 in the morning, Lululemon leggings, mirrored sunglasses, and a damn pair of industrial bolt cutters. That's when I knew it wasn't just trespassing. It was about control. She couldn't stand that someone like me, blue-collar, grease-stained outside her little HOA kingdom, could tell her no. A few days later I got a visit from a county inspector with a clipboard and a notice saying my gate violated historic easement rights. He said there was documentation proving my land used to be a public pathway. Funny thing though, when I looked at the map, he showed me the signature at the bottom was from a surveyor who died in 1971. She'd literally forged a dead man's name to get my gate torn down. That's when I realized she wasn't playing neighborly games. She was waging a campaign. I spent 2 nights in the county records basement digging up proof, the real deed from 1962, my grandfather's name right there in ink. Took it straight back to the county office. 3 days later, the same inspector showed up looking like he'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Riverside," he said, "your documents check out. We're dropping the violation. And, we're issuing warnings about false complaints." He didn't have to say her name. We both knew. But Delilah didn't stop there. She doubled down. Within 2 weeks, I had letters from 4 different agencies: health department, animal control, fire marshal, building inspections. Each one claiming my ranch was unsafe, unsanitary, or illegal. The same wording on every complaint. The same phrases, same grammar. Like she'd copied and pasted her lies. Every inspection cost me time and money I didn't have. And each time the inspectors came, looked around and shook their heads. "Jake," one of them said, "we've seen this before. This lady's playing games. Document everything. She's trying to bury you in paperwork." And she was. That's what rich people do when they can't buy you, they try to break you. After the 5th inspection in 3 weeks, I sat on my porch staring out at the fence line, hands dirty from fixing the gate again, and I'll admit I almost gave up. I started thinking maybe I was the problem. Maybe I should have just sold the place, moved closer to the city, stopped fighting battles that didn't matter to anyone else. But then I remembered my wife, Sarah. Before she passed, she told me, "Don't ever let anyone take what your family built." She said it soft in that way she always did, and I swear I could still hear her voice when the wind moved through the grass. That's when the anger turned into purpose. 2 days later, things got personal. Delilah's husband Garrison, a slick Wall Street type, showed up at my boss's office. Tried to convince him to fire me, said I was unstable, that I was bringing down property values. He even named the construction projects his firm financed the ones my company was bidding on. Basically blackmail with a tie on. My boss, Tommy Kowalski, called me in and told me everything. He's a tough Boston guy, built his electrical business from a pickup truck. He said Jake, that pompous bastard, thought he could scare me. But 3 years ago he tried the same crap, wanted me to fake an inspection report. I told him to shove it. He picked the wrong electrician to threaten. That conversation changed everything. Because if Delilah and her husband were desperate enough to mess with my job, they were hiding something big. That's when I met Mrs. Patterson. She's the HOA treasurer, 80 years old. Gray curls, the kind of woman who still writes checks by hand. She'd been quietly documenting every missing expense, Delilah-approved pool repairs that never happened, landscaping payments to fake companies, and security upgrades that existed only on paper. When I showed her my footage and my documents, she teared up with relief. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered, "but no one ever believes the old lady." Together we uncovered the truth. Delilah had been embezzling over $240,000 from the HOA. Fake invoices, phantom vendors, even transferring HOA money straight to her personal mortgage, all while pretending to be the moral authority of Willowbrook Estates. And that's when my electrician brain started working overtime. If she wanted to play dirty, I was going to show her the cleanest, most perfectly wired form of justice she'd ever seen. I started digging, literally. On paper, I was building a new cattle guard foundation, completely legal, inspected, even approved by the county. But underneath that paperwork, I was constructing something else. A 6-foot-deep pit, disguised as a patch of gravel road, reinforced with plywood, designed to collapse under a very specific weight, around 5,400 pounds, the exact weight of a BMW X7. Lighter vehicles would pass, hers wouldn't. I wired sensors under the surface pressure triggers that would activate cameras and send alerts directly to my phone. I even built retractable steel posts that would rise after impact to keep the car from backing out. And because I'm not a monster, I installed an emergency ladder and first aid kit inside just in case. I wasn't out to hurt her. I just wanted her stopped, caught, and exposed. While I was engineering the trap, my son Michael, he's a lawyer, was helping Mrs. Patterson prepare evidence for the county attorney. The plan was simple: call an emergency HOA meeting, reveal the fraud, and have the sheriff's deputies waiting for the arrest. But I had one extra layer. If Delilah tried to run, she'd run right into her own downfall. The night before the meeting, she came to my house, rolled up the driveway like she owned it in that same white BMW, knocked on my door with a smile that could freeze boiling water. "Mr. Riverside," she said, "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I'd like to offer you a little compensation." Then she opened a leather folder and slid out a cashier's check for $50,000. "For your inconvenience," she said sweetly. "In exchange, you'll grant permanent easement rights to the HOA." I stared at the check, pretending to think it over. "$50,000's a lot of money," I said. "That must have taken quite a vote from your board." Her smile twitched. "Well, sometimes a president needs to make executive decisions." "So, this comes from community funds?" I asked. "Discretionary budget," she said. I nodded while my hidden camera recorded every word. "And if I say no?" Her eyes went cold. "Then you'll find life in this neighborhood very uncomfortable." "Extortion. On video. Perfect." I told her I'd think about it. Mentioned something about discussing it at tonight's meeting, and that's when the color drained from her face. She had no idea the meeting was already set, and that it was about her. That evening, 200 residents packed the community center. Deputies stood by the exits. Reporters had their cameras ready. Mrs. Patterson walked up to the podium clutching her folder like it was a holy book. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice shaking, "our HOA funds have been misused." She laid out the evidence: fake companies, missing maintenance payments, forged signatures. Then the bombshell bank records showing HOA funds transferred straight into Delilah's personal mortgage account. The room exploded. People shouted, some crying, cameras flashing. Delilah stood up, face pale but still pretending control. "These are complex accounting matters," she snapped. "This is slander." That's when the county attorney himself stepped forward. "Mrs. Thornwick, based on the evidence presented and our ongoing investigation, you're under arrest for felony embezzlement and fraud." She froze for half a second, then bolted, literally ran for the exit in her designer heels. Deputies lunged, but she slipped past them and made a beeline for her car. And I knew exactly where she was headed. My phone buzzed the moment her BMW hit the county road motion sensors online. I opened the live feed. Her headlights cut through the darkness, gravel spraying behind her as she barreled toward my ranch gate. She didn't slow down. Probably figured if she could just make it through my property, she could reach the highway before the cops caught up. The sensors triggered perfectly. A split second of silence and then a crash like thunder as the ground gave way beneath her tires. The BMW dropped 6 feet straight down. Dust flew everywhere, the sound of metal crunching echoing across the pasture. When I arrived, the deputies were already there, red and blue lights flickering across the field. The car was wedged perfectly in the pit, nose down, rear wheels spinning helplessly. Delilah was yelling, more angry than hurt. "He tried to kill me. This is assault." Sheriff Martinez leaned over the edge, looked at the car, then at me, trying not to laugh. "Jake, you want to explain this little engineering project?" I shrugged. "Texas Property Code 75.001 allows reasonable force to protect private property. I calculated the deceleration to prevent injury. Looks like it worked." He nodded slowly. "Yep, sure did." 20 minutes later, firefighters pulled her out. No major injuries, just a bruised ego and a totaled BMW. When the sheriff read her rights beside the wreckage, the cameras caught everything. "Delilah Thornwick, you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, criminal trespass, and destruction of property." Her face went blank. She didn't even fight it. Just sat there in the back of the patrol car watching her fancy SUV bleed oil into the dirt she thought she owned. I didn't cheer, didn't smile. I just stood by the gate, hands on the same weathered wood my grandfather had hung 60 years ago, feeling the weight of every inch of this land and every battle fought to keep it. Sometimes justice doesn't show up in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a 6-foot hole and a lesson about consequences. Because in the end, no matter how powerful someone thinks they are, the ground's still waiting, and it always knows how to swallow arrogance whole.